Hi, welcome to the Ham Radio Newbie. I'm Jeff. I'm the Ham Radio Newbie. This video is the longer version of the short called Understanding Antennas, Resonant Antennas. In this video, I'm going to start by defining what resonant antennas are. We will then talk about resonance and SWR. Finally, we'll talk about harmonics and how to take advantage of harmonics to have an antenna resonant on multiple bands. In this section too, I'll explain how getting an understanding of harmonics got me to understand a problem that has been perplexing me for quite a while. Okay, so like before, a disclaimer, I am not an electrical engineer, I'm not an RF engineer, I'm mechanical by training and systems by practice. What I'm presenting is my best understanding based on personal study, and this is far from my area of expertise. Before we start, let's start by reviewing from my basics on how an antenna works video. An antenna is a transducer, and it converts energy in a moving magnetic field into current. The radio picks up that current as the signal that we receive. For transmission, the radio puts current on the antenna, and that current induces a change in the magnetic field, and that can be received by others. Okay, so let's start this video by defining a resonant antenna. A resonant antenna is one that the electrical length of the antenna matches 1/2 wavelength of the carrier frequency that we're trying to transmit or receive on. What this means is that the antenna naturally oscillates, that is, it resonates at the carrier frequency. At this point, the wave coming from the radio and the wave reflected back at the end of the antenna are in phase. So the capacitance reactance and the inductive reactance cancel each other out. And that leaves only resistance as the only loss on the line. So what does that mean? Well, since there's no reactance storing energy in the antenna, a resonant antenna radiates efficiently, putting as much signal on the air as possible. Indirectly, SWR is related to resonance. SWR, standing wave ratio, is the ratio of the forward power to the reflected power of the antenna. That is, the power going out, down, and the power coming back up toward the radio. If that reflected power is too high, you can blow out your finals, and that is what happened on one of my radios. So what SWR really indicates is how well the impedance is matched between the feed line and the antenna. Now, for most ham radios, the feed line impedance is 50 ohms. So a perfectly matched antenna would be 50 ohms as well. But the capacitance and the inductance reactance adds to that impedance. The lowest impedance is when the two cancel each other out, and that's when you have a resonant antenna. So let's talk about harmonics. A frequency, for any given frequency, okay, any integer multiple of that fundamental frequency is a harmonic. An antenna resonates not just at the fundamental frequency, but at each of the harmonics as well. So what this means is that it's possible for an antenna design for, say, 80 meters to be resonant for 20 meter band as well. And I do say possibly because it's not always the case. And this leads to the problem that I was talking about earlier and the problem that I was trying to solve in studying for this. So I have an end-fed half-wave antenna. Actually, I have two of them. They're both tuned or trimmed to 40 meters. And I think I tried to hit the center of the 40 meter band when I cut them. That's going to be important here in a minute. They should be resonant on 40 meters, and they are. And also on the harmonics, 20 meters, 15 meters, and 10 meters. However, I frequently saw my amplifier complaining about high SWR when I transmitted on 20 and 15. And also on 10. Well, I think I finally figured out the cause of that SWR. And for that, I'm going to need to switch screens so that you can see a spreadsheet that I've got. Okay, so column A is the band, and column B is the frequency that is allocated to hams general and above in the US. Column C is a frequency that I picked where I typically try to operate around. Column D is the harmonics, the first, second, and third harmonics. Column E is the frequency of the harmonic for this frequency here for each of these in megahertz. And then I've got the half wavelength there as well, because that's what I was trying to understand. So as long as the antenna is tuned such that, or tuned such that the operating frequency here and the operating frequencies here will be close to the harmonics or will be in band, you should be okay. But that isn't always the case. And let's take a look and change this from 7.175 to, I'm cheating, I'm looking at my notes here, to 7.2375. Let's try that again to 7.2375. And I picked this number because this is probably where I tuned my antenna to, because it's halfway between the range that I can operate on. Okay, so what do we get? Well, take a look at the harmonic for 20 meters and the harmonic for 15 meters. They're both out of the frequency range that I'm allowed to operate in. So no wonder my antenna was showing a high SWR. I wasn't a resonant antenna. I was getting this additional reactance, and as a result, my antenna was out of tune. So what do I do here? Okay, there are a couple of things that I can do. The first one is put on an antenna tuner, and that's what I ended up doing, and that brought it all in because the antenna tuner matches the impedance. That kept the SWR down. That doesn't mean my antenna is super efficient, but at least I'm not throwing the high SWR and I'm not going to damage my radio. Okay, so let's review really quickly here. At resonance, an antenna is electrically as long as 1/2 wave of the carrier frequency. And at this point, the capacitance and the inductive reactance cancel each other out on the forward versus the reflected signal. And that only leaves resistance as the only loss. Non-resonant antennas will have higher SWR because of this capacitive inductive reactances. Resonant antennas are tuned for a specific frequency, but they will be resonant or close to resonant at harmonics of the main frequency, but you still need to check that out. Don't just believe an antenna will be resonant because it's in band. Do the math, and you should see that you're in or out. And an antenna tuner will help you with that impedance mismatch. So that's about it for now. This is Jeff, the ham radio newbie, KB5JRC, wishing you 73 and see you on the air.